Lake Vista was great. We were good. Yeah, I said yellow. I was wrong. I've got yellow on the brain. So this is Forest Springs. This is a minor subdivision. I'll get you your reports here.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. There you are. One for you. And I have an extra. This works out great today.
That's awesome.
Great crowd.
Thank you.
Hey Nicole,
Yes, ma'am.
would you do me a favor? Just
Absolutely.
run up and ask Michelle to hold off on the agenda till she hears from us.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I just want to be on the safe
You
side.
I can use that one. You already know what's in here, I guess,
Thank you.
don't you? Thank you, Bernadette. Okay, so this is the, are you ready for me to start? I guess I should ask.
I am.
Okay. Findings of fact in order for Forest Springs Estates minor subdivision preliminary plat dated January 23, 2019. So the date of application was January 22nd, 2019, and the review period officially ended March 29th, 2019. However, you notice I purposely put that strike through on there. A 120 working day extension was requested by the developer's representative on April 20th, 2019 to address access questions and concerns. So the actual review period ends October 9th, 2019. The applicant is Justin Cox and Heidi Ide out of Belgrade, Montana. The applicant's representative is Bernadette Swenson of Townsend. The proposed subdivision is located off of Silos Road, approximately 7.5 miles northwest of the city of Townsend. Excuse me. The developers intend to create 5 lots from an existing 15-acre parcel. The minimum lot size proposed is 2.49 acres and the maximum lot size proposed is 5 acres. The required preliminary review fee of $2,000 and the weed inspection fee of $200 have both been paid. All lots proposed are subject to DEQ review. No homeowners association is proposed at this time. And although no existing covenants exist for this property, proposed covenants are included in the preliminary plat application as item number 13. Review is performed pursuant to Montana Subdivision and Platting Act, Section 76.3.101 through 76.3.614, Montana Codes Annotated, and the Broadwater County Subdivision Regulations. The proposed preliminary plat, Forest Springs Estates minor subdivision, as submitted by the applicants together with the required supplementary plans and information, appear to satisfy the requirements of these regulations and comply with the Broadwater County Growth Policy Plan dated July 2007. A vicinity map as well as a preliminary plat is provided in the preliminary plat application. No rock outcroppings or the presence of bedrock have been identified on the property. The nearest open water body is the Canyon Ferry Lake Reservoir, which is approximately 1 mile to the east. The proposed development is not in an area subject to flood hazard. Each lot will be served by an individual well. Well logs in this area show an acceptable water source at a depth of 400 to 430 feet with flow rates of 20 to 30 gallons per minute. DEQ will review the lots for well locations. Individual wastewater treatment systems are proposed for all 5 lots. The typical soils in the proposed subdivision are identified as Radersburg Very Cobbly Loam 2 to 5% slopes. The Radersburg series consists of deep, well-drained soils formed in gravelly and cobbly old alluvium. Permeability is moderate and the available moisture capacity is low. These soils are considered suitable for on-site wastewater treatment systems. The soils information and proposed wastewater treatment systems will be reviewed by the Montana Department of Environmental Quality for the adequacy and impact of the wastewater treatment systems on groundwater quality. DEQ will issue a determination of non-significant impacts and a certificate of subdivision approval, which must be presented to the county for recordation of the final plat. Lot owners will be responsible for disposal of their own solid waste. Subdivision residents will have the option of hiring an independent contractor to pick up their solid waste or transport it themselves to the Broadwater County Transfer Station, Winston Canister Site, or the Townsend Canister Site. There are no existing drainages on the proposed subdivision property, and since no new roads are proposed, no roadway drainages will be constructed. The current use of this property is vacant subdivision land. This property is not considered prime farmland, even if it were irrigated. Therefore, the proposed subdivision should not have an effect on agricultural productivity, since it's not currently utilized for agricultural purposes. The responsibility to maintain boundary fences will be the individual landowners. The developer will be required to control any noxious weeds until the property is turned over to the subsequent landowners. Since this is a first minor subdivision, environmental assessment is not required. No fall slides or sumps or adverse soil, rock, mud, or snow have been identified on the property. No rock outcroppings have been identified either. The property is located within the Intermountain Seismic Belt that extends through western Montana and frequently produces small earthquakes and has previously developed some major earthquakes. Property damage and risk can be minimized with construction techniques and earthquake planning. There are no marsh, shrub, or forest lands located on the property. There are no trees or vegetation cover. Existing vegetation consists of light native grasses and some prickly pear cactus. No critical plant species have been identified. Existing vegetation will only be disturbed for necessary construction of driveways, utilities, and structures. Any construction disturbance will be reseeded with an approved grass seed mix. A weed management plan is in the process of being developed with assistance by the Broadwater County Weed Coordinator to control and prevent the growth of noxious weeds. Wildlife such as antelope, deer, and upland game birds, other small birds, snakes, rabbits, fox, and coyote occasionally utilize the proposed subdivision. However, the use is infrequent due to the lack of cover and prime feeding areas, as well as the close proximity to nearby residential development and a busy highway. Therefore, the impacts to wildlife should be minimal. A letter was sent to the Montana Historical Society on January 17, 2019 to determine if there are any known historical, cultural, or archaeological sites which may be affected by the proposed development. To date, a response has not yet been received. Access to 3 to 4 of the lots will be off of Silos Road, which is a county road traversing the south boundary of the proposed subdivision. Access to 1 to 2 lots will be off of Paydirt Lane, which is not a county road, but rather a subdivision road, and it does have an existing RID in place for the maintenance of the road. Tract 4A is a corner lot which will have access off of either Silos Road or Paydirt Lane. The developer will be responsible for the proportionate share of improvements to the subdivision road, Paydirt Lane. Utility service will be provided by Northwestern Energy. Natural gas service is not currently available. The proposed subdivision is in the Broadwater County Rural Fire District jurisdiction. The distance from the City of Townsend Fire Hall to the subdivision is approximately 7.5 miles. The distance from the Winston Fire Hall to the subdivision is approximately 5.5 miles. According to a letter addressed to the Broadwater County Rural Fire Department dated January 17, 2019, the developer is proposing a fire mitigation plan that does not include the cash in lieu of water supply fee. To date, a response from the fire department has not been received. The Broadwater County Sheriff's Department will provide law enforcement services. The Sheriff's Department is located approximately 7.5 miles from the proposed subdivision. The Broadwater Health Center, also located in Townsend, will provide both ambulance and emergency medical services to the subdivision residents. The proposed subdivision is served by the Townsend schools. The subdivision could account for potentially 8 students according to figures obtained from the Broadwater County Growth Policy Plan. The potential for new students from this development could have an impact on existing bus routes, which may need to be altered once the subdivision is at full build-out. Land to the north and south of this property are agricultural, lands to the east and west are residential subdivisions. Since the property is bordered on the south by the heavily traveled Silos Road, and nearby to the west lies the also heavily traveled US Highway 287, these could potentially pose a serious risk to safety of the subdivision residents, especially to children and domestic animals. These risks can be mitigated by proper fencing and homeowner awareness. Since this is a minor subdivision, no parkland dedication is required pursuant to 763609 MCA. It's hereby ordered that the preliminary plat for the Four Springs Estates minor subdivision is approved subject to the conditions listed below. Final plat approval shall be contingent upon completion and compliance with these conditions. Number 1, plans for sewage treatment and water supply shall be submitted to the Montana Department of Environmental Quality for review and approval. Number 2, the stormwater drainage plan shall be submitted to DEQ for review and recommendation. Number 3, priority to development, driveway application, and approach permit shall be requested from the County Road Department for the shared driveway only. Number 4, the shared driveway for Tract 1A and Tract 2A must be constructed prior to final plat approval. Number 5, information on the driveway length to Tracts 1A and Tract 2A shall be provided to Broadwater County Planning Office. Driveways 500 feet or greater shall be designed meeting Broadwater County subdivision regulations, and a turnaround or hammerhead T turnaround shall be provided for emergency vehicles with a 3-point turnaround ability. Number 6, the applicant shall contribute 2/50ths of the cost to upgrade the existing road, Paydirt Lane, to Broadwater County subdivision road standards for number 1 local road. It shall be required that they obtain a current estimate. Number 7, the applicant will be required to submit the preliminary and final plat drawings in electronic format to Broadwater County in ArcGIS, AutoCAD, or MicroStation format. Additional materials may be requested by the county in electronic format to facilitate review of application materials. Number 8, plans for the location and installation of individual mailboxes shall be reviewed and approved by the U.S. Postal Service prior to installation. Number 9, the applicant and the Fire Protection Authority having jurisdiction shall use their best efforts to draft a fire protection plan specifically for this subdivision in accordance with the Broadwater County subdivision regulations. The plan shall be equally acceptable to the FPHJ, the applicant, and the county governing authority. The plan shall adequately address the fire risk analysis, all findings of fact, and appropriate mitigation measures. In the event the parties are unable to come to agreement by the final plat submittal, the applicant shall become eligible to provide the per lot cash in lieu fee for water supply as may be defined in the Broadwater County subdivision regulations in effect at the time of submittal. Number 10, priority to development and or soil disturbance, a weed management plan for the proposed development shall be submitted to the county weed district for review and approval. Number 11, the book and page reference to the restrictive covenants filed with the county clerk and recorder shall be indicated on the face of the final plat. In addition, restrictive covenants revocable or alterable only with the consent of the Board of County Commissioners shall be placed upon the property and shall provide for the following. A, per the subdivision application, all lots shall be used for residential purposes only. B, notification of the potential health risk from radon concentrations, and that such risk can be evaluated through soil tests and mitigated through radon abatement techniques incorporated into structures. C, a notification that each driveway access for individual lots will require an approved driveway application and approach permit prior to installation of a private driveway on the county road, Silos Road. D, a notification that all dwelling units within the subdivision should be constructed to specifications which meet or exceed equivalent provisions in the applicable state building code for this seismic zone, which is Zone 3. E, notification of the potential degradation of existing emergency services due to the potential for growth in a rural area. F, any additional replacement or relocated utility lines shall be installed underground in accordance with county subdivision regulations unless otherwise determined by the utility provided. G, any exterior lighting shall be directed downward to minimize visibility beyond the property lines. H, notification of the presence of agricultural operations in the vicinity. I, a waiver of the right to protest to join a special district for the purpose of providing community water and/or wastewater treatment system improvements and/or maintenance. J, a restrictive covenant binding the landowner, any heirs, successors, and assigns, and all future owners of property within the subdivision agreeing therein to hold Broadwater County harmless and indemnify Broadwater County from all claims, demands, obligations, suits, causes of action, damages, and liability, including the county's costs and attorney's fees arising in any manner whatsoever out of or relating to the existence, use, operation, repair, and/or maintenance of the following. Sub-item 1, earthquake fault zone and any seismic activity, and number 2, water availability. K, each lot shall be maintained in a clean, attractive, and weed-free manner. Noxious weeds must be pulled, sprayed, or cut prior to seed maturity. L, a prohibition of the storage of foods, garbage, or continuous feeding of domestic pets outdoors, or other activities that creates an attractive nuisance for wildlife species. Hay or alfalfa storage and feeding are not prohibited where livestock are permitted. M, lots shall only allow for livestock if a small acreage livestock management plan is reviewed and approved by the county extension agent and submitted to the county. Each lot owner shall be required to create and adhere to their own livestock management plan. N, all cats and dogs must be restrained, penned, or otherwise under the control of their owner at all times. And O, address numbers shall be clearly marked at the driveway entrance to each lot and be easily identified from the road. Number 12, prior to filing the final plat, the following improvements shall be installed or otherwise guaranteed. A, any necessary improvements required by the stormwater drainage plan, weed management plan, fire protection plan, or approach permits. And B, utilities abutting and available to each lot. Electrical and telephone shall be underground unless otherwise determined. If said improvements are not installed prior to final plat, then the applicant shall enter into a written subdivision improvements agreement with Broadwater County guaranteeing the construction and installation of such improvements and shall provide an acceptable financial security guarantee in accordance with county subdivision regulations appendix E. Number 13, prior to filing the final plat, the applicant shall A, provide proof that all taxes and special assessments assessed and levied on the property are paid for the current tax year, including any past delinquencies. And B, provide documentation and abstract of title or platting certificate showing that the applicant is the lawful owner of the property with the apparent authority to subdivide the same, showing the names of lien holders or claimants of record and the written consent to the subdivision by the owners of the land if other than the applicant and any lien holders or claimants of record against the land. The applicant is financially responsible for actual outside engineering, consulting, professional and/or contracted service fees, etc., at the sole discretion of the county for additional review and/or final plat approval of the proposed subdivision. Preliminary plat approval of Four Springs Estates minor subdivision shall be enforced for 3 calendar years. At the end of this period, the governing body may, at the request of the subdivider, extend its approval for a mutually agreed upon period of time. Any mutually agreed upon extension must be in writing and dated and signed by the members of the governing body and the subdivider or subdivider's agent. The governing body may issue more than one extension. A party is defined by 76.3.625 MCA, who is aggrieved by a decision of the governing body may, within 30 days after this decision, appeal to the Broadwater County District Court.
So the shared driveway, Nicole, that is in our regs as they now stand, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
Cannot be used for more than 2.
all right, and it's used for 2.
That's the intent. And the county has some controls over that through addressing, currently me in my department. If, I don't know the tract number.
It
I
is
know
2A?
Commissioner Delger had a question on that, sorry. Look
Yeah,
here.
I asked some
Tract
questions too
5A.
on the effects of road. I don't know if they're numbered correctly.
Uh-oh, okay.
So it says access to 3 and 4, or lots, let's see, access to 3 and 4 of the lots will be off Silos Road.
So full disclosure, I wrote this staff report for the planning board in February with all of the extensions. So I saw that when I was reading through it.
And then access lots of 1 and 2 will be off Pater.
Yes, 1 to 2 lots, not actually lot number.
No, that's not the lot numbers.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
and that, I get it, when I was reading it, I
Yeah.
kind of stumbled over that
Okay,
too,
that's what I
because I
got
was
mixed up,
a
okay.
little, but it was not, those are not showing lots 1 and 2, it's 1 to 2 lots.
1 to 2 lots, okay.
Because this tract 4A could potentially come off of Silos Road. So, you know, obviously 3A has no other option but to come off of Pay Dirt.
Uh-huh.
So,
Right.
So, in this 11A, per the subdivision application, all lots shall be used for residential purposes only.
correct.
But when you go in this book, there's a whole bunch of ifs, ands, or buts in here about the declarant still owning lots and being able to change lot 1A to a commercial lot.
Correct, and that is the developer's proposed covenants. So you have the, at this table, you have the ability to make that a condition, that they amend their proposed covenant, so that's not a commission required covenant, that's not a covenant that the county is imposing on them, this is coming from the developer, that's their proposed covenant. I would strongly suggest that you make a condition, one of your conditions of approval, that they amend their covenants to eliminate that.
To eliminate
Language.
the commercial portion of it.
Correct.
Why?
Because they cannot be used for commercial. Their application was for residential purposes only. So the way that Commissioner Delger is reading it, and the way that it's proposed, the way I'm hearing it, the owner of the land has the ability to change it, which is contradictory to the commission required covenants, which states it must be used for residential purposes only, based on the application.
That's how I read it as well.
So, yeah, I read it that way too, but it looks like a good lot for commercial to me. It does not look like a good residential lot. So if this were proposed as a commercial lot, in the first place, would that still be following the same process, or would our regs require something different for that?
So if this were proposed, and we, the planning board, I had discussions with Bernadette about this, for tract 1A, 2B, and I think you can lend some more, as far as that approach onto Highway 287. I'll turn it over to you in a minute if you want to talk about that, the reason for that. If tract 1A, I mean, it looks and acts like a commercial lot, you know, that the Silos Bar and Restaurant is kind of nestled right there
Right.
in Highway 287. The developers didn't want to propose it as commercial. They would have to construct that driveway to a county subdivision road standard, or gain access from Highway 287, which had its limitations. So, I fully agree. The only way, if you grant preliminary plat approval to this today with these conditions, the only way for tract 1A to become a commercial lot would, for the landowner, not the developer, but whomever owned the land, if it happened to be the developer, to bring it back through subdivision review.
Because it sounds like they're trying to evade commercial subdivision requirements.
They don't want to build the road.
Right,
Yes.
but with their language, after this is approved, they could then go ahead and make it commercial and avoid that.
They couldn't if you
Oh.
keep that commission required covenant A in there,
Exactly.
because that's stronger than their covenants, but it's very misleading to any future owners. If you
Yeah,
were to buy this lot and say you wanted to put a commercial building there, you're reading through the owner's covenants, the commission covenants say, they're contradictory, I guess is what I'm saying. Even though yours is stronger, yours has more teeth, I think it should be eliminated from their covenants, just to eliminate any confusion.
I agree because of the way this is being done, but I think they would be smarter to just make it commercial and spend the money to do it right. That's just my opinion, has no bearing on my decision, but I do see this as an evasion
The
based on their
planning,
language.
the planning board felt very strongly that same way. We had to rely on regulations in the law, and I know that, you know, you commissioners are very good at upholding the law. That's partly why this drug on so long, from January, I believe, or, you know, went to the planning board in February, and here we are in October, you know, with these extensions. Yeah, it looks and acts like a commercial lot. However, we cannot force someone to build a road because our subdivision regulations allow for a shared driveway for 2 lots. It's plain and simple. So we simply don't have the authority to force them to build that road,
So the
to
shared
make that commercial.
driveway
But
is
we don't
for
have to approve
one,
the shared driveway.
It's in the regulations. It's in the subdivision regulations.
and it's for 1A and 2A, not for 5A and 2A.
Correct, correct.
I had misread that, thank you.
Yes, 1A and 2A.
So
Okay.
how are you gonna stop 5A from using the shared driveway? Cause that's part of 5A's property.
So we can't build a wall and force them to not use it. So that's what I was talking about with this addressing. When tract 5A comes in, currently to my office, but whomever happens to be there, comes in to request an address, I have to know, or whomever is assigning the address has to know that they can't have an address off of this driveway. Their driveway has to be somewhere east of that. Which again, that's
It could
tricky.
be right next door.
It could be right
And
next
then
door,
they could have a
but
wide
they
one.
they do have to have approval from currently Public Works Director for the driveway approach because the silos is a county road, so there is some driveway spacing issues. In a perfect world, we could force them, or make them build that as a road. I can't find the authority to say that.
Well, the issue is that if you put a shared driveway in right there, and then you turn around and put another driveway into that other lot, and then you've got all the traffic coming down Silos Road, but you've got the people coming out of the Silos Junction Bar, that's a disaster waiting to happen on that road. And it says right in here, a heavily traveled Silos Road.
And I think we
So
have,
simply by avoiding not building a road, you're putting the public in danger because you've got two, you could.
have 3 because tract 4A could also
And
come
the other
over
thing
here.
that could happen is that person could put that driveway in there and then as soon as they get inside their property, they go right back over there, build their house back in the northeast corner and go down that driveway. Because they don't wanna build a road, and if you're gonna make, if by what they say in here with all this ifs, ands, or buts about making that thing commercial, you're not gonna get an access off 287 right there because that road's already built and there's no turn lane there.
And they did propose that. That was part of this 120-day extension. They were trying to work with MDT. And I'll let Bernadette explain that. She knows it in more detail than I do of why that doesn't work. You want to explain that?
Well, in number 1, that any of the driveways coming off of Silos Road will have to be approved, the location and the construction by the Public Works Director. So they can't, put 2 right next to each other just to make a wide one or anything. That will be dictated by the county of where those driveways, the other driveway goes, for driveway spacing, etc. Yeah, and then this came up with, well, what if it's sold, what if it's used commercially? And again, the covenants reflect, as this was originally submitted last January. And the landowner and I have had conversations after all this whole process with the commission required covenant of residential use only. The covenants are being amended because that will come out. But they tried to get, there is an existing access right at the edge of the property, right at the north entrance, that also access the silos grounds, an existing approach. And they got permission, they could use that approach, but they could only have a right in and right out because of no turn lane. They would have to put in a pork chop medium and overhead lights, and anyways, it was not feasible for a 1-lot deal. Their main, and I can't speak for them and they're not here, but we had a lot of conversations on whether making this a commercial parcel because it has that look. The landowner, because of the different requirements at DEQ, depending what the commercial use is, there's totally different DEQ requirements, whether it's a restaurant, gas station, who knows, whatever. And so anyways, the landowner decided that she would prefer it come back to the commission or to the county for commercial use, depending on if it was sold for a commercial use and what the requirements of that commercial use would be able to be reviewed by the county and DEQ. They couldn't make any guess as to what might be used in the future there. So they felt it was in their best interest to just do them residential. If someone is interested in it as a commercial lot, then they would go through the process with the county with a specific commercial use in mind.
Well, that makes sense,
Yeah.
thank you.
So let me ask this question, if, just say if it does come back to us as a commercial lot, then they would be required to make that a county road?
A
That
subdivision
shared
road.
driveway,
A subdivision road, not a county road. Build it to Broadwater County subdivision road standards.
okay.
Sorry, I just want to make that clear.
Yes, and that would be a requirement.
Built
Yeah,
to
but
county
I'm
standards.
just thinking to say it, okay, it's whatever, if it is a restaurant or whatever it happens to be, all of a sudden you're gonna have all this traffic on that road. Is that gonna be sufficient to just be a subdivision road accessing a commercial piece of property?
Yes. Also, just for the record, Broadwater County road standards, as in roads that are owned and may be maintained by the county, are identical to Broadwater County subdivision road standards. They're the same. The only difference is Broadwater County subdivision roads are not owned or cannot be maintained by the county unless they have an RAD in place. So it's the same road standard. It would be built to a number 1 local road, which is a 24-foot surface, 6 inches of base, 3 inches of top. So it would be built to that standard.
And 60-foot wide.
I'm sorry, yeah, and then 4-foot borrow pits, but a 60-foot easement.
And per the sheriff's department and for this, if this came up, the driveway is a 60-foot easement and it is dedicated to public use so that landowners are forewarned right now at the beginning.
Smart.
And Wynn preferred that as far, so he didn't have any shared driveway issues with landowners in the future, if it was dedicated to the public. But this is kind of like we were speaking before on easements that, you know, could be used for public uses in the future. If we put it on the plat now, then it can be used in the future without, you know, landowners being surprised with it later.
And new question for you, if I may. There's no response from the fire district regarding a fire mitigation plan that does not include the cash in lieu of water supply fee. Can you expand on that?
Yes. So the fire requirement letter is number 26 in your packet.
I interject. A different letter was sent. There should be in your front of your packets responses from the fire department, and I think I had them that delivered them August 12th. At least in mine I do, or August 14th. I delivered packets to the planning board meeting. I don't keep them up. And the fire department has signed off, and they are paying $1,000 per lot.
Okay, all right,
And I do have a copy of that if you'd like to see it.
perfect. Thank you very much.
Come with
You guys want to see that?
Yeah, should you? Oh, I did miss, I see it.
Okay,
Yep, I do have it.
And I do see that you have A again in the commission required subdivision covenants. So nicely done.
So if someone comes in here and buys Lock Track 1A and they decide they wanna make that commercial, then does that 30-foot shared driveway, does that need to become a 60-foot? Do they need to come back in and make that a 60-foot right away?
Well, it is already a 60-foot right of way.
What's that?
It just may not be in their book.
Right. It may not have, that change may not
So it has
be
been changed
reflected
to
in
a
there.
60-foot
But
right.
this, yes, this is a 60-foot.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, that does say 30 on the,
In your book?
No
Yes,
book.
yeah, probably from through this process, but yeah, it is, this will be the preliminary plat, this is the
And
preliminary.
is that cul-de-sac big enough for emergency vehicles, to fire trucks and stuff to turn around in?
What is the radius, 50 feet, it appears, yes. That's what our regulations call for.
So
And again, you do, I'm sorry to interrupt.
if we do approve this, then all of this language in here about that being a commercial lot is null and void, right?
Not necessarily null and void, but if they're amending their regulations, but yeah, essentially null and void. I mean, they could still have it in there. I think that you should make that a condition. And again, you still have time on this. The deadline for this is next Tuesday. That shared driveway is sometimes a good thing and sometimes can be used in a way that we don't necessarily want to see it used. And, you know, I would really like to have seen it built to a subdivision road because it is on tract 5A. You know, we've had these discussions. I had these discussions with Bernadette. I had these discussions with the planning board. But our subdivision regulations do allow for a shared driveway for 2 lots. How do you make the case that this driveway is for 3 lots? Because if tract 5A had no other access, i.e. if it was not on Silas Road, you could easily say, no, that's for 3. But the fact that tract 5A does have road frontage, and when they come in to request an address, the county will have to give them an address off of Silos Road, not off of that shared driveway. That's not saying that they can't use the driveway. I mean, this is saying they can't use the driveway, but who's going to police that? Where's our authority? You know, when I first came here for the county, you know, my predecessor, you know, always find your authority. I cannot find the authority that says they can't have a shared driveway. I don't like it.
yeah. You know, I'll tell you, I'll be honest, I really see this coming back before the commission at a date down the road. The way this is set up. It will just be here before the commission again. And this is what we're trying to avoid, because we've all had to deal with
Sins of the past, sins of the father.
things
I
of
mean,
the
they come
past,
back.
and here we're not solving that problem.
I'm gonna throw out a different thought on that, though. It is a public use easement, and I think that addition by the sheriff makes a lot of good sense. If somebody buys 1A for a business, something that the developer, something that the planning board hasn't envisioned, I think it's actually a plus for the community that they're coming back through the process. And at that point, that road would be built, and then the issue would be moot with the shared driveway, because it's now a county road standard road. So I would say it's good that they're coming back, rather than some kind of a blanket being applied to the lot, that it can only be used for a restaurant, for example. As far as the shared driveways, we have to address that in our regulations, because we don't have any teeth to go off of our regulations at this point.
Well, the other side that I have that is the guy on 5A, if he puts a shop on the back corner of 5A and say he's a construction guy, he's gonna drive down that driveway to get to his shop. And who's gonna tell him, no, you can't drive on that road? And then what's gonna happen is pretty soon we need to have the sheriff out, or this guy's driving on my driveway. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid.
Exactly, yes.
It seems to me that it would be a lot more feasible for the developer to build that road to allow for commercial access, because that's what's gonna happen with that lot. And he could get more money with that, if he could sell that lot as a commercial, he'd get more money for it if he already had the road in, than if he, well, yeah, I'll sell it to you for commercial, but you have to go through all these steps.
I'm not arguing with you, but, and the landowner has gone through all of these decisions, and this was their decision to move forward this way. If they did build that road, then, of course, with no zoning, it could be easily used commercially without any, I mean, if they went to build the road, they would probably amend their application.
But then they would go back through the process
Right.
and, you know, that, and with that commission required covenant, they could not make it a commercial lot without going through an amended subdivision process. And that would be caught, if you will, for lack of a better word, at the time of septic approval, because the sanitarian obviously would not be installing or signing off on a residential septic permit if it were going to be used for a restaurant, a gas station, a hair salon.
So what's the recourse for lot owners 5A and 2A saying, well, we bought this as residential with the understanding that this road is a shared driveway, and now all of a sudden you're coming in here and telling me that you're gonna make this a commercial road through my property?
I guess,
What do you mean by recourse? I mean,
Well, I mean,
What?
so can 5A and 2A say, well, now you've made this a commercial lot, so now you're taking away from the value of my property because now I have all this commercial traffic coming through my front yard. So now you're taking away from those two landowners simply because the developer didn't wanna put the road in and already have it as commercial.
yeah, I mean, I suppose they, you know, that absolutely could be a case for that.
From the perspective of a commissioner though, we would hear public comment from those landowners and take that into consideration with our decision. If those landowners said, I am so happy there's a restaurant going in next to my place, or a whatever, that would be one piece of public comment. If they said, hey, this is not what I bought and I don't want this, we would take that into account. We are not obligated to grant a commercial, the ability for this to be commercial after approving the subdivision within our regulations. Correct me if I'm
Correct,
wrong.
no, and you could always hang your hat on in the interest of public health and safety.
Yeah,
You know, that's such a strong, I mean, that means so much. In the interest of public health and safety, you could deny the application of an amended tract 1A to become commercial and construct that road, which is another, you know, that's still something that the developer should be aware of.
I would like to also suggest that, in the covenants, like I said, they do need to be amended because of the staff report required, or the commission required covenants. I think the covenants should be amended to, you know, off my head, I don't know what, but that if it was ever used, any of the lots were to be used commercially, they would have to come through the subdivision process. The 60-foot easement gives buyer notice, just like the last subdivision we were talking about. If there's a 60-foot easement going through your property, that's a public easement, when you purchase the lot, right there, you're getting notice that there is a 60-foot public access easement through your property. So it's really no different than doing the half roads or whatever in the future. If a landowner bought that and said, hey, there was nothing in any works with the subdivision going to the south of here, now there's gonna be a busy road and possibly 100 lots that could be coming right through their place using their road. That's why, like I said, we can't do it to Grandview now. with the buyers buying at this time, they see that easement, so they have forewarned knowledge and can make that decision. So that argument would be just the same as a road to nowhere, what we call them sometimes. Because they would just go to the subdivision boundary and end. And, but that gives you advance notice when you purchase that lot, that there is a public easement 60 foot wide going through, which is what we have on here also.
So, do you agree, I think Bernadette's suggestion makes a lot of sense. Do you think it's required and it's a good idea to have, you know, after it says per the subdivision application, all lots shall be used for residential purposes only, and it is required to come before the commission to turn this into a commercial lot with, you know, better language than that. But do you think it's needed when it states right here that it's for residential only? And we have it in regs.
You know, with that being said, it might be better to actually include it in the heading of the commissioner required covenants revocable or alterable only with the consent of the Broward County Commissioners through an amended subdivision process. Because all commission required covenants will have that same requirement, so it's not specific to just A, it's also applicable to A through Z. So maybe with that being said, I need to include that verbiage just in the heading of the commission required covenants, comma, through an amended subdivision process.
I like that, if you don't mind.
Okay.
And as far as you guys are concerned, I'm happy to, with that change, move forward today, or we can wait till next week and put it back on the agenda. Since we do have the extra day.
You do. That's the advantage, I think, of having that on Wednesday too.
Yeah.
It doesn't prolong it so terribly long for the developer
Yeah.
or the representative to get working gathering items for approval.
So we're actually approving the preliminary plat with this paperwork versus this paperwork.
That is your document in your left hand that you will be signing. That's what you are approving, yes.
Okay.
But I still think it's a good idea, with that being said, even though they are amending their covenants, and I fully take them at their word, I still think you should include that as a condition of approval, that their covenants should reflect that, and, you know, maybe in a more eloquent way of putting it, but, because if for some reason they decide not to, which I highly doubt that they're, you know, I'm sure they're going to move forward doing that, you cannot come back and require that they amend those covenants. Even though those covenants don't have teeth, it's still misleading to any future lot owners, because it is contradictory to your covenants.
You know, and we keep talking about future lot owners, but, you know, what number 2 states, it says that if the declarant owns any of the lots, they may unilaterally amend this declaration without the consent of any other lot owners. So that means if these folks right here are the lot owners, they could change this.
They can change their covenants. They
They-
can't amend
yeah.
your covenants without going through an amended subdivision process, basically coming back here.
And we're going to be, well, Bernadette said that is going to be changing because part of our approval process is going to include having that change to mirror the language in the commission-approved covenants.
Okay.
That's secondary to ours.
Yes, yours will always have stronger teeth. You have the sheriff's office and the county attorney, if you have to go higher than that, backing you on commission-required covenants. Any landowner proposed covenants, they're on their own.
Right.
I mean, I hate to say that, but, you know, the county does not enforce covenants. We only enforce commission-records covenants.
And they can change them weekly.
Yeah.
As
And it's
some
been done.
subdivisions, oh, yes.
So,
And knows this people really
Yes,
well.
I do know.
so when this comes in for final plat approval, 2, 3, 4, and 5 will all be removed
Of 2, 3, 4, 5
of their hand, of
If-
this booklet that we got.
if you include that as a condition, it absolutely must be. If you don't include it as a condition, I'm not even gonna look at it to see if it's been amended. I mean, I'll look at it, but I'm saying, you know, it won't matter.
You have no teeth.
I think it
No.
has to be.
Yeah. So if you want 2, 3, 4, 5, is that what you said?
Yeah,
Removed, you absolutely should include that as a condition of final plat approval. That way you will see it at this table in however many months when I come back to you with
well,
all
I
of the final
think that we
documents.
should remove 6 also, because
Yeah.
all of those have to do with the declarant having a right to override all the rest of the
I
land.
agree.
So 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 have to be removed from their covenants.
As long as there's a reason why I mean, can you point that back to being contradictory to the commission required covenants? I don't want you to get too deep in the weeds and, you know, say, well, I don't like that they
Well,
have the power.
I guess
but-
you might have to take a look at that and see.
Okay.
Anything that says the declarant can change the use of the lot without the adjacent land.
As long as it has that
Approval.
language that's contradictory to the commission required covenants, you absolutely can request that change. If it's saying, you know, the declarant will only allow pink houses, you don't have any, you don't wanna remove that covenant, there's no authority for you to remove that covenant, is what I'm saying.
We would be wiser not to pick 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We would be wiser to say their covenants must mirror the commission
county's.
covenants. Because 1, we could miss a number, 2, we could add one that we shouldn't be adding. So if we keep it general that it needs to mirror our language, then that applies to the entire document.
About conform to.
Conform is much better, yes.
Okay.
The other thing too, before a motion, according to 76-3608 MCA, subsection 6, I think? No, 3A6. No, 3A, sorry. Okay, so, this is something we should be doing with every single preliminary plat, is going through this, and I'll explain why in just a second, but, the impact on agriculture has been addressed in the findings of fact, and it shows that there are none. The impact on agricultural water user facilities also shows that there is no impact. The impact on local services has been addressed and mitigated by all the local services, and will be addressed in our motion. The impact to natural environment has been addressed per the findings of fact. Impact to wildlife appears to be nil. The impact to wildlife habitat is also, there's plenty around the property, so it's mitigated. And the impact to public health and safety is also being mitigated in the plan and also with our motion, intended motion. So the reason we have to do that, we had a meeting, and you know what? I'm gonna share it with you when we're done, so I don't muddy the waters. But share that, because that should be done by the commission, even though it seems redundant. So are you guys ready for a motion then?
Yeah,
I will move, based on 76-3608, and our discussion, that we grant preliminary plat approval to Forest Springs Estates minor subdivisions with the requirement that all covenants from the developer reflect the commission required covenants in the findings of fact, and a request of the community development director that all the language prior to commissioner required covenants include that any changes need to go through the subdivision process for approval.
is there a second?
Second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. As stated, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries.
So I'm glad Nicole is still here. are you ready to move on to another thought?
In one moment, I'm sorry, I
Okay.
just wanna make sure that I'm capturing this. I am ready.
So I share this because this is something that the commission, all three of us need to learn and need to do. I'm not gonna share any of the details, but Nicole and Nicole and Julie, years ago, were asked to be deposed for a lawsuit on a subdivision. I was asked to sit in on the meeting. The attorney, in talking about deposing Nicole and Julie, was going through everything that they do, and I said, well, what about the commission? Are you gonna depose us? He said, no, you guys don't get deposed. Everything, your entire defense is in your vote and your discussion for those findings of fact. If you didn't go through each of those pieces that's required in MCA, doesn't matter. You can be deposed up, one side and down the other, but if you didn't do it when you made your vote, it essentially says it didn't get done. He said, you need to go through each one of those in detail, and we have done that in the findings of fact, but if we don't verbally say we acknowledge that this document reflects MCA, it didn't get done.
Didn't we talk about doing a little checklist for ourselves?
That's right here.
And, yeah, so that we do that every time.
We each get one of these.
Yeah,
We'll be getting another one here
Mhm.
shortly.
yeah,
Nicole gets 5, one for Daryl, one for Mike, one for me, and this should come
Mhm.
with you every single subdivision we review. And
Right.
that statute should be followed by at least one of us, if not all three of us.
And
As
that
part
number
of your,
again.
sorry.
What's that?
That number again,
763608.
As part of your findings of fact and
Section
order
3.
packet, I could easily cut and paste that from MCA with a little checkbox by it and include that in your findings of fact and order report or in the front of the subdivision application. Because I do think that's good practice, because, I do remember that deposition.
Yeah,
It's not very fun.
no. And I don't think it'd be appropriate for you to put together a checklist for us, because if we don't follow what you told us to do and we miss something, that's on us. It shouldn't be something where we can blame you for not doing our job. So we need to have the checklist, maybe make one of our own. I used to have one in that I brought to every subdivision.
well, that's what I'm talking about, just something.
Yep, you can put together
our
one
own
for
little
yourself.
guideline that we follow.
Yeah, yeah. So I asked you to stay because I had a phone call from Morrison Merrily yesterday, and they said that our highway from town to the silos is on the list for 4-lane construction. That affects what we've talked about here, and what they said is, you guys need to get on the list to maybe have a walking path added to the
Oh.
bridge.
Okay.
Since they're doing the construction anyway, they've actually had a record of doing that. Since you are working with the rec board,
Mhm.
would you mind, I'd be happy to attend the next meeting if
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
can and share what those guys talked about. We had a meeting years ago with, and I think we've talked about that, but trying to get some kind of a walking path added to our bridge because it is so unsafe, it's so narrow. And NDT said you have to have a reason for it. Well, we did that. And now that they've got the construction project, maybe that's an opportunity.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect. I will follow up on that.
thank you. And there was another, did you, do the zoning notice? We're gonna have that on the 15th? I think the 14th is Monday and it's a holiday. Can't be done any later.
I didn't post any notices other than the one, for next Friday.
Okay,
That's the only notice I've posted.
so I think today it has to go in for this one.
Oh dang, okay.
Which we should be okay, because I think she says 2. But let's do it as soon as possible and get that in, because it says no later than the 16th.
Okay, I was reading that as posted when I saw that, posted no later than the 16th.
Oh, is that what it says?
I don't know. I will look into it. I
Okay.
did read this.
Okay, I
And
know
I'm
you
sorry,
did.
I was looking at it, because it's to begin the 30-day protest period, and then the county commissioners will be meeting on the 18th. So that's the way I interpreted it, not that the meeting for this, I better call Janet.
Yeah, zoning notice,
Mm-hmm.
my guess is it needs to go in the paper for the second reading October 15th,
Okay,
and then start the 30-day process for this one.
okay.
So I would suggest doing the notice first, then call Janet to
Okay.
double check.
So
You can
just,
always pull it, but let's make sure we get it in.
perfect, okay. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's already 12:30. We have only until noon, don't we? Or is it 2?
I thought it was 2, but maybe try and get it in if you can.
Okay, all right,
Otherwise, we'll see what we have to do
perfect. Okay.
for the 15th, not the 16th. if
For the
that's okay.
15th, not the 16th.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Was that everything? You said you had 2 things for me?
That was
So
it,
that's
the
two, right?
road, the bridge, and that.
Perfect.
All right.
And so you are going to add Lake Vista Lot 5 minor to Monday's agenda?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Just that one.
I'm going to make this amendment, and I will make sure that you all have a copy, and then I will have you sign it. I don't want
Okay.
you to sign it until I make the amendment of those 2 conditions.
I see all your chicken scratch, it just
Yep.
doesn't look professional.
Nope, it really doesn't.
I do want to say just one other thing. Wherever you guys decide to land on that claim is fine. And each commissioner needs to make their own decision. But to reduce this to, I don't like when, is absolutely wrong and inappropriate. And you guys know from our experience working together, I pull a number of claims. And frankly, we should each 3 be pulling more because some claims have gotten through that should not have. We had a closed door
Here,
meeting.
Nicole.
We had a closed door meeting with the board that allowed a claim to go through that shouldn't have. We had a claim go through that where a person violated the code of ethics. And as much as that was supposed to come to a meeting, it actually got signed instead and passed through. So we 3 need to be much more diligent on the claims. It may really stink because it's a lot easier to just be a yes stamp. But just because a claim comes before us doesn't mean we're obligated to sign it. Our obligation is making sure that every decision is equitable, and we sometimes make the hard calls of saying, I question this expense. I have questioned a number of expenses, and not all of them are wins. So that was an unfair statement on his part. That's, I'm not gonna influence your votes in any way on that. The other thing is Daryl, I would request in the future, when I do put a note on a claim, which I've done often, let me know that you gave authority.
Well,
I had no
I didn't give
idea.
authority. He kind of misspoke. I didn't give authority. I said I didn't think there'd be a problem with it. And where I probably made my mistake is not talking to you guys about it, but, I just didn't think there'd be a problem with doing something like that. So I guess I learned something from that, and we'll just stop right there,
That's fine, it's just,
okay?
I put the note on, just shoot me an email,
Yeah.
so that
I
I
didn't
know.
actually see it because it went in the mailbox.
You're supposed to be going through the mailbox
Well-
before every meeting.
Laura, don't tell me what I'm supposed to be doing.
Those are commission documents, you
I
should
go
be
through there, and
fine.
I just didn't catch it, okay? So let's just stop. Stop before we go any further, please.
You know what, I have a
I'm
job
gone.
to do,
I'm gone.
Daryl. You're out of line.
You're out of line.
Holy cow. You know, we 3 have a job to do here, not just one of us.
Mr. Chairman, are we adjourned?
Yes, ma'am. 12:34.